All right, but we're going to begin this morning with some breaking news. A U.S. official confirms to CBS News U.S. forces conducted strikes on military targets on Iran's Karg Island overnight. This comes as President Trump is ramping up the threats ahead of that 8 p.m. Eastern deadline. In a new Truth Social post just out an hour ago, the president says, in part, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. So, Olivia, this threat is as serious of a threat that I've ever heard from a head of state, not just in the United States, but anywhere in the world.
Certainly, Vlad, this is an extreme extreme amount of threatening words that the president is using here. Certainly is something that caught all of our attention this morning, and a threat that should be taken very seriously. The president saying that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. He says he doesn't want it to happen, but it probably will. And then he goes on to say, now that there's regime change, they're hoping that less radicalized minds will prevail and maybe something wonderful will happen. But who knows? And you also just mentioned separately, we learned about those strikes that are happening on Karg Island. We're told that those strikes did not target the energy infrastructure on the island, but targeted the military infrastructure that's on that island. Now, that was already previously attacked, but certainly amounts to another data point to look at in the escalation that we've seen, at least just in the last hour or so. Never mind the fact that we are less than 12 hours away from this deadline that the president set. Now, this is a deadline the president has set and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. This is the third iteration of that pushback, is now this 8 p.m. on Tuesday night deadline that we are staring down. But the president has said he maintains if they do not make a deal and reopen the Strait of Hormuz in the next several hours, he plans to target civilian infrastructure such as bridges, power plants, desalination plants, perhaps. It's important to note that that is considered a war crime unless they can prove there is some nexus to military targets as a reason why they are targeting bridges and power plants. But still, Vlad, this is very much an escalation from where we were just yesterday.
Now, Olivia, you paraphrased in that Truth Social post. He said, quote, maybe something revolutionarily wonderful can happen, right? It sort of seems like it's leaving the door open for some kind of peace negotiation. Where do those talks stand right now?
Yeah, well, yesterday the president had a press briefing where he spoke to White House correspondents and reporters, where he said he believes that Iran is negotiating in good faith. But still, today we have seen this escalation. So it appears to be happening on dual tracks. We actually just heard from the vice president a short while ago who's in Hungary. He's there with Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has an election coming up on Sunday. But they did have a press conference, and he was asked about the strikes on Karg Island. He said that was always part of the military plan, so it doesn't amount to a strategic change in posture from the military. But on the negotiations, he says that the U.S. has largely won the war militarily, and the president believes that right now, even though the U.S. has achieved those military objectives, they believe that Iran is trying to squeeze those economic constraints right now on the Strait of Hormuz, which is hurting everyone globally. And because of that, the president is giving them this ultimatum. So that was also very notable. He also did say that the Iranians are not the fastest negotiators, saying that there have been some delay in transmitting those messages, which was signaling to me that they are recognizing that perhaps some of the responses they're getting from the Iranian side aren't coming through instantaneously. So therefore, this negotiation is taking a little bit more time. Even at one point, the vice president pulled out his cell phone and said that he had a text message from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that he needed to read regarding these negotiations. So you can see how this is all playing out in real time. They say they are expecting more of the negotiations to happen in the next coming hours, but the vice president did repeat that the ball is in Iran's court.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi reporting from Washington for us. Thank you, Olivia. For more on the situation in the Middle East, we turn now to CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer in Tel Aviv. So, Liz, what are you hearing about this new strike that the U.S. has conducted and the president's threat?
Well, as Olivia said, the strikes on Karg Island hit military targets, that is mines and missile storage sites, for example, and not the main gas and oil processing facility, which is enormous. This place can fill 10 super tankers at once. And it does appear as if all the storage facilities and pipes and pumps and so on are being left intact, presumably because when this war ends, whoever's in charge is going to need revenue from the oil flowing through it. So apart from the attacks on Karg Island, we know that Israel has hit at least one railway bridge. We heard or saw the Israelis text all over Iran in Farsi, stay away from trains and train stations today. So at least one railway bridge has been hit. And apart from that, a whole range of targets for the U.S. and Israel, ranging from airports to residential areas, presumably where there are Iranian firing positions, to petrochemical complex. In the opposite direction, Iran has been firing missiles at Israel, at least 4 strikes today, causing damage in residential areas.
And as the president's deadline approaches, what, Liz, are we hearing from Tehran, if anything?
Well, the official response so far has been silence. We have seen a message go out from the Revolutionary Guards to patriots, if you like, saying, show up tonight and surround power stations and become human shields. I think it's a safe bet to say that some of the Iranian pro-regime supporters will either feel obliged to go or go and do that. But overall, people are just plain terrified. They're staying home. There's been a lot of hoarding of groceries in case there's so much damage that food can't get from the countryside into the cities. And people who have been able to leave the cities have just gone either to their home villages or some have summer houses. And apart from that, they're staying close to their phones and praying for the best.
All right, Elizabeth Palmer, thank you.
All right, let's bring in Eric Lob. He is the Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at Florida International University. He's also the author of Iran's Reconstruction Jihad, Rural Development and Regime Consolidation After 1979. So, Professor, Iran already struggles with poor infrastructure, economic instability. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, he addressed this during a bilateral press conference in Hungary earlier. I want to play a little bit of that for you.
I think there really are 2 pathways, and I'm oversimplifying this a little bit, but I think pathway 1 is where the Iranians decide they're going to be a normal country. They're not going to fund terrorism anymore. They're going to be part of the world system of commerce and exchange, and that's going to mean much better things for them economically. It's going to mean better things for the peace and safety of the world. It's going to mean a lot of good things for a lot of people all over the planet.
The vice president goes on to say option B would obviously be to choose a very economic situation. But the question now on the table is, how could an attack like this, where the president of the United States signals to the world that he is prepared to destroy an entire civilization, how does that, I'm just trying to understand, I'm trying to reconcile that kind of language when you're not talking about destroying military infrastructure, you're not talking about decimating their ballistic missile capabilities or their ability to conduct terrorist warfare from afar. You're talking about destroying an entire people.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. And as you said, this is really the language that's being used is pointing towards an indiscriminate campaign, not just against the Iranian regime or the Iranian military, but really a campaign designed to inflict collective punishment on the Iranian population. And when you talk to Iranians in Iran, to the extent that you could have those conversations these days, they're seeing this less and less as a war against the regime that many oppose, and more against the entire country, and as President Trump is saying, against an entire civilization. So this is not only causing Iranians to become more nationalistic, but it could also further escalate the conflict and not only add to Iran's economic troubles, but to the economic troubles and pressures that the United States and the global economy is facing as a whole.
I want to follow up on that because I think at the beginning of this conflict, you saw a lot of Iranians celebrating, the death of Iranian leaders, excited about the possibility of regime change. But what you're saying, I just want to clarify, is that we are seeing folks get more nationalistic. Is that correct?
Well, that's absolutely right. Of course, there are still many Iranians who hope for change. But as this war intensifies and as Israel and the United States expand their targets more and more to civilian infrastructure, and even leading to the death of more and more civilians, Iranians are becoming increasingly nationalistic and also turning their attention away from politics and just, as your correspondent mentioned earlier, prioritizing day-to-day survival, particularly as these very serious and terrifying threats are coming from Washington and even from Israel, which today threatened and has started to strike Iranians' train and transportation system.
The president vowed to have the backs of the protesters when they took to the streets to protest earlier this year. Now he's talking about wiping out everybody. Again, I'm using the president's words when he says civilization. That means everybody in Iran. Means an entire people. And I asked this of a deputy director of the CIA yesterday, that there is some historical antecedent for this, right? The United States in the past has conducted foreign policy in an attempt to win the hearts and minds of a particular country or a particular people, and in doing so allowed either brutal dictators to take control of a country for the very simple fact that they were anti-communist in many instances, or that they aligned with U.S. interests. And in the end, those people turned, even though they were being led by brutal dictators, they grew more antagonistic towards the United States and even their own leaders who were brutalizing them. Isn't that a lesson for us to take something away from?
Well, it certainly is. And, whether this administration can learn from history is an open question. But really, this war has done two things. Number one, it's further, as top political and military leaders in Iran have been assassinated by the United States and Israel, it's just made the regime increasingly consolidated around hardliners. It's made it more militarized and securitized, which does not bode well for Iranian activists or for regional actors, allies, and partners in the region. That's number one. And number two, as we discussed, this just causes Iranians to question what the true intentions of this war actually is, whether it really is in the interests of the Iranian people, or whether it's more and more an attempt to destabilize the country militarily and economically and weaken it at all costs.
Before you go, Eric, my heart just breaks for the Iranian people, those people who are innocent and who are being caught in the middle of this. Yes, they hate the regime. They hate what it's done to their country, to their people, to their family members. And they have been terrorized by their leaders over the course of the entirety of since the revolution in 1979. And now you've got the United States that is also threatening to harm them in an attempt to harm the regime, right? And I just wonder, is there a way? We all understand that people have, there are ways to choose your government, but it does feel like these people are trapped between these two powers. One, a terrorist, brutal regime that seeks to wipe out their neighbors, seeks to wipe out the United States. That's the regime, and the United States now, which is responding in similar language.
Well, that's absolutely right, Vlad. And for decades now, since 1979, the Iranian people, really the people at the end of the day, are the ones who pay the ultimate price inside and outside Iran in different conflict zones. But they've been caught initially between a highly authoritarian and repressive regime at home and economic sanctions abroad, and or coming from the United States international community. And now, as you've suggested, the ante has been upped against them, where they're not just trapped between those internal and external forces, but now by daily American and Israeli strikes against not just military targets, but against the civilian infrastructure and population.
Yeah. All right. Eric Lob, thank you. It's always great to have your perspective, my friend. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks.